Hey, Michael, this is Ashley from St. Petersburg, Florida.
Hey, Ashley. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
We're talking a bit about defeating right-wing, uh, the right-wing takeover of basically the globe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I always keep circling back on how to defeat this.
Yeah.
In essence, what I get stuck on is the right-wing noise machine and Fox News. And how exactly do you defeat something as large as Fox News? Um, it makes me very nervous because this is honestly quite larger than the state of Germany and the Weimar Republic. My concern is just the rhetoric coming out of, let's just say, Fox News in particular. And how would you recommend, I don't know, dismantling it, if at all possible? Because I'm developing a pretty bleak, just bleak outlook in terms of how is it possible to
Well,
defeat something so large and global.
I actually think. I mean, first of all, I want to kind of like slightly reassure you and maybe disturb you more at the same time. So
Go ahead.
I guess the way I wouldn't fixate on Fox News so much. At the end of the day, it's a cable news channel that a couple million people watch. They're overwhelmingly I'm too frankly jet lagged to figure out how to politely put it, but they're extremely old. And it matters. It's an extremist network. It's part of the propaganda network of the Trump administration. I think Tucker Carlson in particular is somebody that people need to be very strategic and thoughtful about. Though, and actually that's going to be this weekend's episode with Liz Franzek, who hosts the TrueAnon podcast. I should have had her on. I'll have to have her on back again soon. But and even as I agree with a lot of Liz's critiques of how the left has responded to Tucker, and I think we need to be very strategic about what he represents. I'll say that at the same time that his advertisers are fleeing, and he's actually in serious trouble. So I think that on the larger end, media monopolies are fundamental. I mean, it's just proven. Even things that are relatively smaller. When Ronald Reagan got rid of the fairness doctrine, that clearly has had a really significant effect on American democracy, on people's ability to process information, and so on. So I think that, again, it's another advantage of Bernie Sanders. Bernie's always been someone who's been very powerful and understanding of breaking up media monopolies and the effect of media monopolies on democracy. Is probably another reason why he, triggers all of these, all of these people so much. I think that, in fact, I'll do an honest self-plug. I think you do have to support shows like this. Obviously, we're a fraction, but we are a growing ecosystem. And it's the ecosystem that this show is in is small, but it is starting to get to the point where we can work the refs too, and that's significant. We can push back on certain narratives. And I also think it's important, again, to actually get outside of a media conversation and be in a political and a physical one as well. But look, I think Fox is incredibly toxic, incredibly dangerous, but in the end, this is another in both ways. In other ways, like being in this like new media environment, like we're not dealing.
It's better than it was 15 years ago.
It's certainly better. I mean, when you say when I was like, when I was college age around like the invasion of Iraq, you really could have a feeling that like Fox News was like a state network. There was nobody who opposed war on any of the networks. and the extent to which anybody criticized the Bush administration in a mass public media, and this is like, you had blogs, which were both, some of them were cool, and I'm not trying to denigrate it, but they were neither nearly as influential as the left media you have now, and they were actually not nearly as ideologically interesting or wide-ranging. I mean, some of them were very smart, but they were basically like progressive Democrats who couldn't speak anywhere else and had no representation. And in mainstream media, it was like the most you could get is like either, yes, we need to bomb all of the world, but we, probably should like not cut Medicaid quite as much, or yes, we need to bomb the rest of the world, but we're doing this in a dumb way and we need to do it in a smart way. So today's ecosystem is actually much better in some respects. And also, as far as young people go, I don't think Fox News is necessary. I think actually, again, with the exception of Tucker, Tucker has something, some stuff that the other ones don't. I don't see any young
Laura
people.
Ingraham.
Well, Laura Ingraham is horrible, but I don't see any young people having any interest in Laura Ingraham. I'm talking about in terms of emerging markets and what it does.
Clarify something?
Sure.
I do agree with you about the ecosystem in general, and I kind of use Fox's, I hate to say so, but a scapegoat, or something more encompassing of the just the right-wing noise machines that exist online as well. And I totally agree with you on direct action, ad boycotts, and continuing to expand left and in general independent media, true independent media. What I keep circling back to, and I look very much forward to Liz's take, is just how do you break up a media conglomerate?
Well, she's not talking about breaking up a
just
media conglomerate. She's talking about dealing with an actual counter argumentation. But I mean, on the policy level, if that's what you're asking, this is one where you got to elect people like Bernie. Well, then Bernie, you got to elect Bernie Sanders.
You have to attack corporate power.
Yeah, you got to come up with a plan that reinstates the fairness doctrine, that breaks up Time Warner, that reinstates all sorts of rules that you need to have about, Sinclair can't exist. You need to reinsure net neutrality. Yeah. You should, NPR and PBS are such failures in so many ways, but I would be interested if it was done right in having mechanisms for mass public funding and investment in basically independent journalists, independent journalism at the local, state, and federal level. That's the direction I'd go in. I really appreciate the call. I hope that answers some of your questions. And I would read, it might be a little dated, but I think Robert McChesney is the guy to read on this. I think he is the person. Robert McChesney, I think, is the person who has just written the most straight up books on like what the 96 Telecommunications Act did, just the actual policy mechanics of how we got where we are. And I agree with you. It's a huge problem. And I can tell you again, I saw Bernie Sanders speak as a congressman when he was in college. I happened to go see him speak somewhere, a couple hundred people. And he talked about healthcare and everything else, but a significant part of that speech was about media and corporate monopolies and how it affected all of the other issues he was trying, which, back then, again, on the positive side of the ledger, the stuff he was talking about then was, you can beg people to write about the poverty rate in this country, or the plight of family farmers, or agriculture monopolies, or, what trade did, or what welfare reform really did. Anyways, I appreciate the call. Thank you so much. We're gonna have
a lot of times when you get into that mode, think about the shoes on the other foot. Think about if you were trying to suppress, say, socialism, how big of a problem you would have on your hands right now, especially relative to any other time in history, for instance, right? Like previously you could just assassinate the head of leaders like Fred Hampton and you could do serious damage to organizing. And now we're in a completely different media environment. Fox News is metastasized out of control. It's a huge cancer. But it's also, I think, waning in its influence, and it's cashing its influence in right now too. So it's not necessarily all good news, but I mean,
that is one. I mean, honestly, if I can put on my optimist hat here, we're all aware that there's a collapse of an order that, by the way, it needs to keep being emphasized, did not work for the vast majority. The WTO, NATO world was not good for most human beings, if I could use those as institutional stand-ins. And now we have this rise of this nationalist, this authoritarian thing, and it's not even really nationalist, because at the end of the day, it's still utterly devoted to global capital. I mean, look at what the Brexit idiots have in store for the UK. It's a complete neoliberal nightmare mixed with racism. Just like Bolsonaro, just like Trump, just like Modi, all the rest of it, just like Netanyahu, Putin, all of these people. Another interpretation, I mean, one interpretation is that we're just having 2 deaths right now. I mean, I think we've had a very, I actually think neoliberalism might be a little bit more resilient than people are thinking, of the sort of democratic centrist variety. That might be more resilient, even though it's really getting body blows. And demographics are definitely not destiny, but there are some attitudes, there are some impulses, there are some things, and especially in the United States, frankly, the lagging indicator between government and where politics is heading in terms of people's broader attitudes is pretty stunning. And I think this is, depending on how immersed you are in reading about stuff, this is a difference that's so weird between being in your 30s and being in your 20s. Because I can honestly say it's really bad. And I can absolutely remember a time when single-payer healthcare was a pipe dream.
Yeah, I mean,
like a right and correct and necessary, but pipe dream.
I mean, like I'm 26, and like the shift in the past 5 years has been incredible.
Yeah, right.
I would just want to add, though, about Fox News. I feel like a lot of times we fixate on it. And yes, this message, it is a cancer, and it's very frightening when you watch it. You feel like there's people living on a completely different planet. But I think when we talk about the media, oftentimes what's really overlooked in the United States is the death of local and state level journalism.
Definitely.
And it's more important than a lot of people even recognize, because that's the slow march of the right. If you look at what's happened over the past 15 to 20 years, is that the right wing has taken over state legislatures all across the country and are implementing all sorts of horrible, nasty, draconian rules. And there's nobody, there's nobody who's funded to watch. I mean, there's some wonderful people out there who continue to do that work. I know Texas Observer in the state of Texas does some really wonderful indie work. Scallywag magazine in the South tries to do work. But, a lot of these organizations are really underfunded. They're always trying to ask for money. And really, for the people in power, there's no significant, watchdog over them. And that's really like where Fox News almost in a way serves as a little bit too much of a distraction for people on the left, where we fixate on it. But that's like the loud yell. But like the real action is sort of what's really going on behind the scenes, too.
I was talking with my Luke Mayville about how, he's doing Medicaid expansion in Idaho. And some little tiny newspaper that has one person left on staff or something, the Koch brothers have a PR team for that region to give them press releases to dominate the news coverage. And that's not even the newspaper that's already just been bought by some corporate conglomerate. Absolutely. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.